This is the discussion of how to complete a literature review and how to put it all together. So I'll go through how you put together a literature review. This will both help you fulfill your literature review assignment, but then this is going to be exactly what you turn in for the midterm exam. So regardless of, as long as you hand something in for that literature review assignment, I'll give you full points, but it's to your advantage to get as much done as possible so that you can have your midterm exam basically completed. Okay, so in a literature review, remember these important points, right? You're writing an essay that's leading to an argument. Ultimately, you're supposed to create some kind of a logical flow that leads people to your hypothesis. You do that not just by summarizing other research, although that's part of what you include, but you also talk about like how they did things, how they go about things, what did they find, and what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of previous research. Now, you don't do that with everything. You just deal with the stuff specifically related to the argument you want to make. Sorry, I'm just gonna try and make this a little bit bigger so that, I don't know, so it looks maybe easier to see or something like that. There you go. So let's say that we're going to do your example. You have this research question about how social networks might influence belief in conspiracy theories. You've got a bunch of research you've done. You've collected some information on literature 1, how social networks influence attitudes. You got something about like why people believe conspiracy theories as your second literature, and then you're going to merge them together. So I'll show you how you do it. So the first thing you're going to do for literature 1 is you're going to compose an essay about 5 to 6 paragraphs long about the influence of social networks on attitudes. So in that first paragraph, you're going to do an overview that has all your highly cited references in it so that people believe that you know what you're talking about. And you're just going to say, like, here's the research that's been done on social networks and how they influence attitudes. So you got this big kind of introductory paragraph that sort of lets people get a feel for what's been done on social networks. Then you're going to move into some specific studies that are relevant to your argument. And you're going to emphasize stuff that might be relevant to like the specific part of social networks that you think is going to be important. So what if you think that the important element of social networks is they'll tell you something, and when everybody around you says one thing, that's going to influence your attitude somehow, right? That makes sense that might be something. So it's maybe like agreement in social networks or something like that, right? So if that's kind of the argument you're going to use, is that, well, if everyone in your social network believes it, you're going to be more likely to believe it. Or if everyone in your social network doesn't believe it, you're going to be less likely to believe it. Like if that's the argument you want to make in the end, then in these 2 paragraphs, or 2 to 3 paragraphs, you're going to focus on those specific studies that talk about how that works. And then in paragraphs 5 through 6 is kind of where you talk about the weaknesses and the strengths. So like let's say that you think that the strength of social networks should be measured by Facebook friends or Twitter followers or Instagram or something like that. But other people measure social networks by saying how many of your friends blah, 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 blah. Right? Maybe you say, I don't think that survey measures, asking people what their friends think, I don't think that's a good way of measuring what a social network influence is. I think the better way to measure social network influence is to look at what's happening in their social media, right? So if that's what you think and that's the argument you know you're ultimately going to make, then you might focus on, at this part, I forgot I like to annotate this. Right, at this part here, you might emphasize in these these last couple paragraphs, you might talk about how social or how surveys are a bad measure of social networks. And you could talk about the strengths of that approach, but the weaknesses of that approach, right? So that when later on you talk about what you're going to do that's better, you've already laid the foundation for that. Then step 2, you're going to compose another essay about why people believe conspiracy theories. So you have this big overview paragraph of why it cites all the big stuff, right? But then you also want to talk about some important studies that are going to be relevant to your argument. So maybe there's a thing in there about people who belong to groups are more likely to believe certain things. And so maybe you think that, well, it's not the groups isn't necessarily influencing their attitudes, but it's the homogeneity of views of people in those groups. So that's just another word for social network, perhaps. And so then maybe you would focus in on the kind of the group-based stuff of conspiracy theories. It doesn't matter to me what approach you take, but you get the idea. Like during these ones, you want to focus in on specific things, right? And then again, you want to talk about the weaknesses. You might say, well, they just ask them in a survey if they believe conspiracy theories, but I want to measure, like, do they actually say it on their own? It's easy for someone to maybe say in a survey, yes, I believe in that, but it's a very different thing for a person to actually write to somebody else on social media talking about they believe in a conspiracy theory, or to like a conspiracy theory, or to endorse it, right? You could just talk about different ways people measure it. But again, this is all just building to your argument. And then the last part is you compose another essay of about 5 to 6 paragraphs, merging it all together. So in the first paragraph, you're going to lay out your argument so that people can clearly see, okay, the argument is that when there's homogeneity in social network about a certain view, a person is more likely to adopt that view. So if everybody in their social network, or if a large number of people in their social network believe in some conspiracy theory, then this person's going to be more likely to believe that conspiracy theory. And you just sort of lay out the argument. Again, you're not going to have as many citations in this section, probably because this is your new idea. This is your contribution. And a lot of people hopefully haven't done this research before. So you might have some citations just to remind people of previous studies you've mentioned, and then like how you think that these ideas are related to each other. Then paragraph 2, you state your hypothesis. My hypothesis is that when more than 75% of people in one social network endorse a conspiracy theory, that person will be more likely to believe it as well. Then the last couple paragraphs, you discuss how your method of analysis is going to overcome those weaknesses from prior research. So you could talk about like, I'm not going to use survey-based measures, I'm going to do all social media or whatever, right? I'm going to do interviews, I'm going to do observation, I'm going to do an experiment where I make people's friends tell them they believe something that they don't really believe and see what happens, stuff like that. You can talk about how you're going to measure it in a way that's better than everybody else. You put all that stuff together and that's your literature review. Okay, so since we can't do this thing where you get with a partner, let's just look at an article. There's an article I saw recently. I'm trying to remember where I might have saved that article. Oh, I'll just look at something I published. Because why not? And then I'll just show you how it works. So the biggest questions people ask me on this assignment in the midterm, the 2 biggest questions are, well, what if I don't have 5 paragraphs? Again, I'm not going to go through counting your paragraphs. It's about the quality of the literature review that you put together, right? So you're graded on quality, not the length of your thing. And then another thing that people ask me oftentimes is, how many sources do I need? Again, I tell you that you need 10 sources per literature to get a C on the assignment. But what you have to do is you have to have enough sources to persuade me that you know what you're talking about. Oh no, this is a different article. Yeah, here we go. So I wrote this paper about Trump and Twitter and if he persuades people when he tweets. Just using it as an example. So what happened is we were running a survey about guns. I probably mentioned this before. And then Trump happened to tweet in the middle of our experiment. And so it gave us a nice little natural experiment to see what happens to public opinion before Trump tweets and then after Trump tweets. So here we go. Literature 1. Presidential public campaigns. There's this whole literature about going public and what it means. So here's a sentence, just a broad overview sentence. This is my literature 1, right? When the president goes public. And you see, nice sentence. Instead of a president persuades the public to support his proposal with relative ease, that's what these guys had argued. The emerging view is that presidents are constrained, and then look at all these people I cite for that particular sentence, right? But also we have this weird thing where modern presidents are using the bully pulpit even more frequently. Again, citing people. This paragraph is designed to let people know Edwards is actually the editor of this journal, right? So I have to make sure he knows that I know the literature. And these guys are his grad students, not Rottinghouse, but Eshbach, Soha, and Peake are both grad students of Edwards. Okay, but then I'm starting to move into my argument, right? So maybe the president can't persuade the public. Oh, wait. Yeah, maybe they can do it in some situations, cite all those people, but maybe they can't at all, and that's Edwards' big thing. Also, right, there's all these various problems. Make sure you cite yourself whenever you possibly can, because it boosts your citations and makes you feel more important. But you see how I'm gradually in this, moving more and more narrow into the purpose of a public campaign. So like, some people say that presidents are not even trying to persuade when they give speeches anymore. Maybe they're doing these other things, right? Cite those people. But they should probably have an incentive to try to persuade people when they can. Look, in this whole paragraph, I have no citations because it's just an argument that I'm making and there's nobody else that's made it before. But it's an important argument for this paper, right? We shouldn't, just because it's hard for presidents to persuade doesn't mean they don't ever try. And just because they tend to fail doesn't mean that they're still going to try and find a way to persuade people if they can. And so maybe like they're going to look to try to just persuade partisan subgroups. So that's another argument that people make. Okay, so again, I'm focused only on the aspects of presidential public campaigns that are going to be relevant to my argument. Persuasion. I mentioned that other people have shown that they might be about something other than persuasion, but by and large, public campaigns probably want to persuade. Okay, then we go to Twitter. There's not a lot of research on Twitter. This one makes me happy because I cite Netflix. I watched a movie on Netflix and I decided to cite something from Netflix just for fun. Sometimes I do that in my papers. I wrote a paper on like the military and I tried to cite the movie Jack Reacher, but the journal didn't like that, so they made me take it out. But that's just a fun thing I do, try and slip in citations to things. Anyhow, I cite like my friend's book that's not, it doesn't matter. Okay, so again, Twitter, right? Barack Obama has more Twitter followers than Trump, but Obama used Twitter differently. There's just not a lot of literature on how presidents use Twitter. But I try to like kind of include all of the research on that as possible, right? And then it's like a really simple literature review number 2, right? So given that he uses Twitter a lot, maybe he wants to raise his approval ratings, or maybe he wants to persuade people. So, but we hypothesize that a tweet from Trump will probably not have an effect on overall opinion, but among his base, it probably will increase public opinion. So that's it, right? There's not a lot of really simple, easy literature review. So then I go methods and results. So you get the idea, right? So how long does your literature review have to be? Well, it depends. There's a lot of literature on presidential public campaigns. And if I only cited a handful of people that have looked at how presidents use Twitter, so in my whole literature review, I only have 4 people, and one of those is a Netflix movie. So, right, it all just depends. It's all about the quality, not the quantity. I chose a topic for you guys that there's tons of stuff to try to make it easy for you to find literature. This is why I don't let you pick your own topic, because if I pick it for you, I can pick a topic where I know it'll be easy for you to find a lot of research, and then you don't have to spend a lot of time looking for things that might not be there. So that's the idea, right? You're writing an argument, you're writing it in paragraph format, you're citing people where it's important to cite them, and in that way you get lots of citations, but it's about the quality of the literature review. right? I don't care if you have 30 citations per literature. If this is written poorly, you're going to do poorly on your literature review assignment. So make sure that you're writing it as an argument to lead up to your hypothesis. Okay, so it's been super fun, and I hope you all have a great time doing your literature reviews. I look forward to reading them. Have a great day.